bearing with us. Well, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce artists Gretchen and Penny Slinger, two phenomenal artists whose personal encounter tells a fascinating story about the timeless power of mentorship and vulnerability. At a time in which I think we all feel defutured, in that imagined futures have been taken away from us, their works create ripple effects of possibility. Well, I'll start with Penny. Penny Slinger managed to infuse surrealism with a uniquely feminist consciousness. With an emphasis on female agency, her work cuts into layers upon layers of taboo, denial, and projection. There's also this archetypal, matriarchal dimension to her more recent work, which subverts the marginalization of older women in our society. Meanwhile, Gretchen Andrews' work will open your eyes to a whole world of algorithmic oppression. She adopts the performative codes developed by techno-capitalism in order to interfere with them, while also delighting us with the candor with which she shares her personal power trips on the internet. She dares the art world to confront her vision boards not as simple aspirations, but as art objects. That being said, what a complete honor it is to have you two as guests. I'll give the word to you now, Gretchen. Gretchen, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, sorry, you broke up for a second. What did you say?
I give the word to you now to talk to me.
Oh, great, okay, wonderful. So Penny and I have had the opportunity to have many hours of discussions. Normally, we are neighbors. We have our studios next to each other in Los Angeles. I'm just out of state for some quarantine right now. And I'm really lucky that we moved into the building that I had just moved into downtown. I've been thinking a lot about how I really wanted to have some female mentors, and the ultimate female mentor dropped in. And something we started talking about really early on in both of our work is the idea of subversion. And we both do it pretty differently. If you know our practices, or like could just glean from that introduction, there's the idea that what is given to us in the world, and then renegotiate it and use it to infuse a sense of power in our work and in ourselves. I do this by hacking my way into major art institutions through my search engine art process. And Penny does this in a lot of ways, but one of the primary ways is through her surrealist collage, whether digital or physical installation, taking elements of the existing world and renegotiating them to create something new and usually somewhat, if you know what I'm saying, Penny, like somewhat troubling. It has like this very like jarring. So I guess maybe like what should we do with the time that we have, given that it's a little bit of a different format than originally expected. I guess I'll talk quickly about one of the projects I'm working on, and then kind of hanging over to Penny to say a couple things on Subversion, and then we can take some questions. So my current project is I'm taking over the 2020 presidential election through a search engine art piece where I insert my vision boards into the search the next American president. And these vision boards, you can look them up on Instagram at Gretchen Andrew to see some of them. They're flowery, they're positive, and they're not the face of any political candidate. They're about shared hope and love of nature and books that I hope the next president has read. And the idea is both to make people aware of how easy it is to tamper with the technical information system, and also to cause the sense of productive and positive unease with the way that the structure currently is working and basically to which it can be manipulated. So because I want there to be time for questions for sure, I'm going to now sling it over to Penny Slinger, who I miss getting to see every day. And maybe you can talk a little bit about subversion in general and share some of your recent work.
Thank you, Gretchen. So to get a kind of broad sweep on things, I'm now older, having been many years conducting a life of art and using myself very much as the guinea pig. I felt that, you know, the main kind of politics I'm interested in are the politics of experience and the internal dialogue of the self and self-realization, self-knowledge. And in that pursuit, I looked at the history of art and saw that the woman plays a very significant role, but more as the muse of a male artist in general. So I wanted to try and subvert that particular paradigm and use myself in particular as my own muse throughout the history of my work in different forms and guises, if you like. My current work is focused around using myself, my own body, my naked body at this time in my life as that muse, and trying to look at the myth, I would call it, of ageism that is so prevalent in our culture, which prevents the wisdom of our elders, and particularly the wise woman archetype, of being able to percolate back into culture and cross-fertilize it and enrich it and imbue it with the wisdom of experience. So I'm using the glove of my body as that vessel for my body of experience, which is quite substantial at this time. And during the pandemic, I have been doing a specific series called My Body in a Box, which has taken the icon of the box as being what we're all inside in this time of social isolation and self-isolation, and in self-examination and what happens inside that box. So that's a quick review.
I think something that, like, one of the reasons why this was the particular topic I thought would be fun to speak with in Penny, because like we said, with like subversion and kind of norms and expectations, a big part of both of our work. But with Agora and with digital art in particular, I've found the tools available within the digital landscape to be quite liberating, especially when shifting power structures around, because you don't need budgets or permission or kind of this whole history of like big, especially in America, like the big abstract male painter identity. And I very much see it as an area that a lot of women work in the digital, especially in net art. I think of Olia Leolini, people like Lorna Mills, and really women, for tech being such a male-dominated world, there are a lot of female digital artists and a lot of female net artists. And similar to Penny, I use the digital in an aspect of what I do, although what we both do is very object-based and very sort of self-performative. Yeah, anything else on that, Penny?
Yes, I mean, the way that we are approaching this whole digital arena is different, but certainly all of these pieces add up to something that's really significant and important. I mean, with Gretchen just plunging into challenging the search engines, and I myself, as a collage artist, I have found that the tools for making collage have been made so available, not only to myself, but to millions of others really in this digital age. And once I discovered Photoshop, it was what got me onto a computer. Before that, I was completely computer illiterate. I didn't really have much desire to really use computers, but when I saw Photoshop and all the tools associated with that could allow me to take collage to a whole next level, it was absolutely irresistible. It was like finding the Holy Grail after a lifetime of cut and paste. And having done 3 different collage books using techniques of cut and paste and the dark room, where I would montage negatives together to create transparency, as well as the sticking on of different images and collage, to be able to find the tools in the digital media that allowed you to manipulate all the different parameters in the collage world and create these layers and transparency and scale and everything that was really the next level. And so I couldn't not use it as a collage artist. And it's interesting now that these tools have made collage, I would say, one of the most used and available mediums in the world of art and the commercial world, right across the board. So it's a very interesting time to look at this and also see, well, what makes things significant and relevant, and what is a serious way of using this media, because now it is so easy, really, to do so much that we struggled to do as artists beforehand.
Great. Agora people, do you guys want to ask some questions or go into audience? Yeah, whatever you guys think.
Well, thank you. That was super insightful. I'll start the questions for the panel if nobody chimes in. So I was wondering, as you were talking, what is one limitative belief you had about the digital, or how did you overcome this obsession of the art world with objects? Considering the digital is largely considered immaterial by most people.
For me, it was a very intentional search for the object within my practice. Like I now make, I always made paintings, but I now make these very object-based vision boards. And I took that constraint of the art world and didn't look at it as a limitation, but looked at it as a sense of like I'm a systems artist, right? Like I look at existing systems and I figure out how to be myself and navigate within them. The internet being an example of that, but then also to look at the art market, to look at the art world, to look at its demands and find ways to subvert and be part of that at the same time. I'm a very physical person. I like to get messy. I like to spend my day in a traditional art studio as opposed to in front of a computer. And so while I think it's not the best thing for art that there is certain constraints of market and object, I personally have found it kind of a fun challenge to figure out where the object base fits into my practice. And I'll hang it over to Penny, who also makes a lot of object-based work.
Yes, I mean, looking at what Gretchen does, she definitely works in the virtual world with all the things she's doing with the search engine. But then when she comes back to be making her own art, she's in the studio, she's using objects, she's using canvas, paint, and three-dimensional things as well. And to me, I've always been very much of a multimedia artist in the sense that I've wanted to find all the different options in the different media that's available and then find a new way of bringing them together and melding them. So because really anything artistic inspiration comes out of the ethers, it's not physical. And we as artists, our challenge is to how to bring that through and manifest it in some meaningful way so that it's available and accessible to others. So as collage was for me something that opened up so much possibility to be able to quickly manifest things. You know, I can paint, but to paint the kind of textures and surfaces and detail that I really appreciate and enjoy takes a long time. But if I find those ready-made in the collage world as photographic elements, for instance, then I can start to put them together to create this new reality, which is the thing I'm interested in, not just in representation. So I think when we talk about objects, it's also this idea too about representation. For me, the whole magic of the art lies in bringing elements together to create a new reality that we haven't actually seen before. So we can do that in so many different ways. And my joy, as I say, is in blending many different media. So it doesn't matter to me so much what medium I'm using and whether I'm creating a collage using a computer, or whether I'm creating it by sticking pieces together, or whether I'm painting something, or whether I'm doing a three-dimensional live cast. They're all part of one stream of inspiration trying to find itself in form. So for me, whatever works for you is what is going to be the appropriate medium to use. And different projects have different challenges. There's different meditations, if you like, which go with all the different media you use. It's a very different process to be painting than to be putting together pieces of material on a computer screen. But it's the same creative spirit that's behind it all. And so in the end, that's what matters to me, what the vision is, not what the medium is that you use for it. Although, as I say right now, we have such a wide range of incredible opportunities for manifesting our visions in a much more accessible way and of sharing them so quickly through social media. And this can be both a way of propagating and enriching the world of art and aesthetics, but it also has the danger of trivializing art, because once you see so many images up and about, when often not even attributed, then you're only getting the look at the picture. It's like seeing pretty flashing lights rather than knowing the source of the energy that goes behind them. And for me, that's where lineage and connectivity and knowing what an artist's practice is really significant, because then you know what that image grew out of, and it's just not an isolated event, but something that does have breadth and depth. And I think that's really important in the time of great accessibility, to really have those things which give us the thread of lineage and the breadth and depth, which is a real artist.
Wow.
And on that point, I feel very much like the idea of like picking a lineage and working within one, like I think is really interesting in digital art, and having net art find its roots, whether in performance or abstract painting or surrealism. Like I think helps give that art historical context when working in the object-based world.
Well, thank you for these beautifully complex answers to my simple question. I was wondering, because there's an interesting parallel in terms of the fact that for Penny, for you, your artworks are almost part of your spiritual practice. And that also happens in a sense to Gretchen. There's this parallel of you, of manifestation. You think of manifestation, I get a sense, in a very different way from each other. Would you like to expand on that?
Gretchen, go ahead.
Yeah. In my practice, I take this manifestation, law of attraction culture, and I sort of push it to an extreme. It's still a sincere part of the whole meta performance process of what I do, where I visualize being on the cover of Art Forum, and then like I'm through that visualization process get to having like a practice that becomes an exhibition that's becoming an actual ad in Art Forum that I really believe someday will become an actual cover of Art Forum. So it's sort of just like taking something and pushing it on its conceptual ends for me. In the idea of manifestation, I'm much younger, so my practice isn't as deeply spiritual yet, because I do think with Penny, you get a very spiritual aspect to the practice that comes from wisdom, and mine, you know, by nature of it being just younger and more green, doesn't have that same depth to it. And I think that depth definitely manifests itself as spirituality within the work that Penny does.
Absolutely.
Yes, and you know, the whole idea of what is inspiration. I believe we are kind of vessels and conduits, and that if you have that gift of being able to receive vision, and I've always had this incredibly rich mindscape, you know, always my psyche, my being has been filled with incredible imagery and visions, and I feel like I've only been able to sort of, you know, touch the hem of the skirt of this majestic, multi-dimensional potential feminine being, really, because they say in spiritual traditions that there is, you know, the male is spirit and the female is the manifest side of spirit. And so she has just, you know, displayed such an array of visions to me. And so my whole life, I'm just trying to catch a little of the essence of that, the glory. And I think that's the, you know, the job of an artist, that if you are blessed with visions, then it's up to you to try and cultivate your skills and your tools to be able to express what you can of that. And so the craft comes in to support the vision. And so that's what I see the process of manifestation being, trying to find ways to translate the visions in the mind sky. And for me, that's been a rather wide palette, with everything from performing arts to painting and sculpture to non-traditional digital approaches to things across the board. But all of it is one weave of trying to bring the threads together to express this amazing visionary tapestry, which I'm gifted to be able to see parts of all my life.
Oh, thank you. Does anyone have a question? Come on, don't be shy. I'm comfortable with the silence, but we have to use our artist time wisely. Well,
and I'm trying to figure out if I can push my the thing, but I haven't heard back yet. So we'll keep rolling, and if I need to, if anyone has questions, please.
And if not, I know you have some more questions. So
yeah, I have.
Please feel free.
Hundreds.
Also, if people could, if they have a question, they could put it in the chat during your question, and then that way people can have a moment to think about it and to present it.
Exactly. That's for the introverts out there. So it really, I was really curious because you, Gretchen, said about systems, that you're fascinated with systems. I've read before that you keep saying that. I wonder, does the art world seem predictable to you more now that you found mentorship in senior women artists who've been there and they had the luxury of time to understand how that works, the rarefied field of art, or however you want to call it? So you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you ask that one more time?
Sorry. Sure, absolutely.
Didn't need to get off.
In terms of systems, you think of the art world as a system, and when I hear the word system, it makes me think about a predictable, able to control it sort of situation. And I was wondering, sorry.
Well, yeah, systems. Like I think of systems in terms of inputs and outputs, and there's sort of a black box that can go on in between the two. My work that I do with Google is very much like I create inputs, and then knowing something about the inside of this black box that is Google, try and help manipulate or change the outputs. But you're putting things out there, whether it's into the art world, whether it's into the universe, whether it's into Google. And as you put them out and something comes out the other side, I spend time trying to figure out, okay, how do I get the outcome that I want? Mm-hmm. And I think of systems as rules, and I think of rules as having spirits and of having letters of the law. And there's often a lot of ways, a lot of subversive ways to follow all of the rules, but still create an outcome that the system didn't intend. And to be, to use the system to change the system is maybe like one way to think about that.
Okay, now I understand. So how has having the mentorship of senior women artists enrich your understanding of the art world, for instance?
Well, I mean, I think Penny's like an amazing example of this. There's a lot with female mentorship broadly, not just in art, that people, there's a reputation of women not supporting women, especially in fields like art and tech, banking, where there aren't a lot of women, where the women who are at the top of their game didn't have the support of people before them, so maybe aren't as aware of supporting people. And Penny is just a really great counterexample to that. As a woman, as an artist, she and a lot of the other people she's introduced me to remind me that, you know, the arc of a career is hopefully very long. She's always fill the fuck out. And at the same time, like, you know, there's a really, really great part of working with Penny that isn't, or, you know, working amongst Penny that isn't pedagogical, it's not hierarchical. When we talk about my work, she's able to be at a table with me in a way that previous mentors of mine have only been comfortable with, you know, this very clear sense of like the information goes down. And I think that openness has really, I think it's kind of feminine in energy, but it's definitely very specific to who Penny is. Very generous and secure artist, and really, I learned so much about not just art and the art world, but the, you know, kind of like the ways of handling the ups and downs as well.
Same question for you, Penny. I wonder, how have your mentees enriched your experience?
Oh, well, you know, it's been a constant challenge. I can't say that the life of a committed artist is an easy one, or would recommend anyone to really take it unless they have the guts to kind of see it through. And I've been in and out of the system, if you like, all my life. I have a natural tendency to disrupt systems, not because I'm even necessarily intending to, it's just that I don't quite fit in the way things are planned, and so it kind of has to work like that. In terms of what Gretchen was saying too, I do think that the advent of the feminine, which we're seeing rising as a principle in our culture now, because we've had so much of the other side of things. And you know, one of the qualities of the feminine, and I see this being something that should be owned by men as much as women, it's not just for women, but principles like collaboration, cooperation, support. You know, you have to look at nature and how nature's systems work. They are all complementary, they are all synergistic. Everything contributes to the support structure of other life forms. And we as humans have, you know, got into these crazy patterns of domination and competition, which haven't really served us very well. And we're kind of looking at that and reviewing that and shaking that out now. So I think the principles of what we're talking about, of, you know, support and of mutual complementary activities, because, you know, in the grand design, there's room for all of us, and nobody is sitting in anybody else's place. We're all unique in the way that we manifest and who we are, and our pieces that we contribute to the whole. So I think that these old paradigms of divide and rule, which have put women, particularly, set them against each other to compete for, you know, whatever the powerful men, or all these things, are things that need to be thrown out the window now. And we need to be here supporting each other to bring out the best in each other so that collectively we can evolve.
Absolutely. Well, that's very inspiring. Does anyone have a question? I really want to include you. In the chat, no?
I was typing something. Hi. But I think I'm just going to use my mic. It might be easier. Speaking of systems, it's really fascinating to hear this parallel. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what you think about actually challenging the current hierarchy and in a way creating maybe more processes of inputting into, especially in terms of, I think, you know, the comparison in your work, Gretchen, with Google. I think I find that, yeah, just when I first heard about it, I was like, what, can you do that? But also, you know, your comparison, Penny, with nature too. So in terms of, is there something more we can learn from that we could apply in our everyday life and work?
Gretchen, go.
So for me, like it's one of the interesting critiques of my work in that it gives more power to the existing system, because while I'm slipping, subverting and slipping into the existing system, it doesn't, by saying I want these things, by naming the Turner Prize and the Whitney Biennial and trees, I'm giving some of my power to an existing system. And I think that's an interesting critique. I think there's an uncomfortable tension in my work, because my work is quite activist. In my position towards the art world and my position towards the tech world, which is not in any, it's not morally separate from it. It's not trying to overthrow a system, because I like systems and I like rules. I need a system to operate and navigate. But at the same time, I really am finding, even where I am, the amount of input and value that I can change the programming for my upcoming museum exhibition in Monterey, like take the model of Penny and really be inviting people into what I'm doing, and especially around feminism and other women, have been trying to find ways to, not just within art, but finding places for women to have a voice to speak about the challenges in the work that they do, even when it's not art and even when it's not tech, because art allows for institutional critique. The tech industry isn't as comfortable with it. Banking isn't as comfortable with it. Taxing isn't as comfortable with critique. So while it's maybe not so revolutionary in the art world to institutionally critique, trying to make that cast larger and have people be thinking about the systems that exist in their own worlds of meaning making. That answers the question.
And as for the systems in the art world, I mean, I think that it's such a challenge to be able to be someone who is sort of on the cutting edge of cultural change, and to maintain that and still be able to get the kind of support you need to continue. It's almost like a paradox, if you can't really make it if you don't give all of yourself to it, but to give all of yourself to it, you have to be able to do that and still find a way to make a living. So, it would be wonderful if this kind of system could be disrupted in a way where we're finding that the support can be made available for those who are making change rather than those who are just blue chip and established. So that's one thing in that way. And when we get back to nature, we just have to study the way nature works. And interestingly, if we're looking at culture and cultural change, which I think is on everyone's mind right now after this time of introspection of what can we do differently, if you look at the way that, for instance, indigenous people work with nature, there's that paradigm of honoring the spirit in all things. And if we just took the kind of systems that our technology has given us and meld them with that respect for all that is, for the consciousness that is present, for the sentience that's in all things, all matter, all creation, and start to give back as much as we take and understand that circle of life and that hoop of existence, then we would start to be able to work with nature instead of trying to conquer her. And I think that this is the kind of thinking that we need to bring to the forefront now as we start to re-emerge and recreate. It's a chance for recreation. So why not create in a model and mode which is in empathy with, in resonance with all the rest of the way nature works, rather than setting ourselves apart from it.
Great answers, both of you. We have another question in the chat. Adrian is asking, I was wondering in general, what would you change or improve about the internet as a system, especially in terms relating to your work?
So I would make it, so the internet ultimately is a public space, or should be a public space, and it's primarily operated and owned by, and the rules of engagement are set by private corporations. But its histories are very governmental. They're very collaborative. They're very creative. And if we had thought about it like a public park, or a public highway, even a highway with tolls that might be built by private corporations, I think we would have a different relationship to the way it creates power, the way it relates to commerce, and having more spaces that are non-capitalist on the internet would, I think, do amazing things both for its creative potential, but also for community. And really big fan of the way the Mozilla Foundation looks at those questions. And if you're interested in kind of like who I think is at the forefront of thinking about that and actually pushing for regulations and changes on that, I would love to then.
So, from an artist's perspective, how would a consciously designed, ethical, humane, and mindful version of search engines, for instance, look like?
I think there just wouldn't be one version. That's the one of the things that my work hits on is that the idea that there's a right answer is absurd. We're different people, we're diverse, we have different needs, and we have different outcomes we want in life. We prioritize, some people, prioritize nature, some family, some work. Like it's all an acceptable answer. But the system is built by companies who prioritize a very narrow set of lifestyles and people and priorities. And the more and more diversity and more inclusion and less monopoly power would be, like, I think, a really good first move.
Absolutely. And Penny, I was wondering, are there any sacred spaces in cyberspace for you? Is there anything?
Well, of course, there are sacred spaces everywhere. I myself had an intention which never got completely fulfilled because of not really getting the support, and so I moved on to other things. But I wanted to create an actual temple for the divine feminine online and create a community around that and all resources which complemented that. And I felt that if we could have this kind of sacred safe space where people could share their experiences, but their experiences around these divine energies and around their connection with the sacred feminine, that we could start to really build such an incredible community of sacredness online. And so that potential is there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fully realize this because it was such a big vision and it needed help. But if anyone would give me the opportunity to do that, I would. And I think that this is important. And, the whole way that we have this ability to share with so many people produces that potential for sharing in any dimension that you wish to do. So that would be a next level of evolution for the internet, to have more of this kind of sharing of the sacred along the lines I'm expressing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your answer. Do we have other questions? Well, then maybe we should wrap up. Thank you so much, Gretchen and Penny, for your time and for your energy. If we were in TO, I would ask for you to give a big round of applause. But, well, that didn't happen. So,
thank you for being patient with the technology and with us. Please connect with both Penny and I are both on Instagram, and we're Los Angeles based, and someday the world will open again and there'll be exhibitions. Penny's got some great digital work up right now as part of their online portal that has to go for ages and series. And yeah, both of us are pretty active on Instagram, so if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, it's a really great way to connect with us and to see the visuals of what we've been talking about.
Yes, and thank you, Gretchen, and for moderators here all hanging in and going through the Maya, all the technical issues, which is both our blessing that we have with this technology, but also the challenges that we all have to face in big or small measure. And we had quite a big one today, but as you see, we ended up being able to find an alternative and to be able to still communicate and share, which is the essence of what this platform was all about, how to be able to actually share from our hearts and from our experience so that we may enrich the lives of others. And I think that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And as you said, we focus way too much on medium specificity in general. It doesn't matter. We got to share you with our audience.
Thank you so much for coming and being so flexible in terms of adaptability. That's the proof indeed that humans are stronger and best than machines.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys.